conclude the Sue Gray process, and that's when we'll be able to wrap the whole thing up. And that, I mean, genuinely, I think is the sensible moment for us to have a discussion.
So it's the Met Police finishing is the time. Okay, that's fine. Moving on to Ukraine now. Tom Tugendhat as Chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee.
Thank you. It's good to see you. Has President Macron been speaking to Putin for too long?
I think it's, Tom, I think it's very, very important that the unity of the West and the unity of NATO should be remembered and prioritised, and that's what we're doing. I think the question of negotiation with Vladimir Putin, the value of those negotiations is an open one. My own view is that Putin is plainly not to be trusted. I think the most important thing, and here I think Emmanuel and I would be in total agreement, the most important thing is that whatever happens should be what the Ukrainians want, and it's for them to decide what their future should be. That is what is at stake here. It's not for any of us, whatever we may think, to try to create a future for them. It's for them to decide their future.
So do you agree with President Biden that the end state should be not only Russians out of Ukraine, but Putin gone from the Kremlin?
Look, I understand why Joe Biden said that, and I understand there are frustrations that people feel about Putin, and to desire a change of government in itself is not an ignoble thing. I think there are probably plenty of people around this horseshoe, Pete perhaps, who would like to change in this government. But that's the objective of a lot of democratic politics. But it is, let's be absolutely clear, it's not the objective of the UK government. And it's very, very important that everybody gets this. We are simply setting out to help to protect the people of Ukraine and to protect them against absolutely barbaric and unreasonable violence. That's what we're doing. And I think that it's vital to keep that. There were 141 votes, Tom, in the UN General Assembly against what Russia had done. And that was a fantastic thing. And there was, as you know, there was a more recent vote which almost kept the number. You've got to keep this simple.
And so, given the efforts is to protect the Ukrainian people, I think something that we'd all welcome. What did you think of the Franco-Turkish-Greek attempt at humanitarian aid?
You mean for Mariupol?
Yes.
I think that I am obviously in favour of humanitarian aid, but Tom, you and I remember this ruthless cynicism with which Putin manipulates so-called humanitarian aid corridors in order to throw his opposition off balance. You remember what he did in Aleppo, the constant dangling of peace processes and humanitarian corridors, when really what he wants to go on and do is administer extreme violence. And again, I think it's a good thing to be humanitarian. It's good to help people, to help refugees. But I have my doubts about the genuine willingness of Putin to cooperate.
Do you think, however, there's more that we could do for civil defence? I mean, there are various avenues that we could assist with. The Ukrainian government itself has asked for example, armoured Land Rovers assistance in, if you like, white helmets type units within Ukraine. Is that something that you're already looking at?
We're certainly looking at going up a gear now in our support for the Ukrainians as they defend themselves.
This is civilian assistance rather than military assistance, if you like.
Right. In Mariupol, the issue is, as you know, that the Ukrainian defenders are now pretty much encircled, and there's a humanitarian catastrophe. The question is, can we help the Ukrainians relieve Mariupol, if that were possible? Would APCs be useful for them? You mentioned armoured Land Rovers.
Armoured ambulances.
We're certainly looking at that. But,
well,
I'm afraid it depends very much on the environment that Putin's forces are willing to allow.
Prime Minister, I understand that. I'm actually more looking at the civilian assistance that could go into...
The white helmets.
A white helmets type arrangement. So armoured ambulances to help, for example, around Kiev, around the Dnieper River, areas where the Ukrainians are suffering not just from casualties from the artillery, but then the aid units that go in and assist the injured are being targeted by Russian units. And in those areas, armoured ambulances could help, possibly some extra logistical supplies in terms of body armour and so on for medical units. Is that something you're looking
It's
at?
a very interesting suggestion, Tom. I mean, it's not something that Volodymyr Zelensky has requested so far from me personally, but that doesn't mean that the Ukrainians haven't reached out and asked for it through other channels. He's asked for a lot of different things so far, but not that. I'm certainly keen.
Let me just repeat then a request from some of the Ukrainian MPs. They have asked for it, so I'll pass that in through your system to make sure it's gone in. The question really is also, when are we going to lift sanctions? Because presumably if there's stick, there also must be carrot. At what stage do you think that sanctions could be lifted on Russia? Does it have to be Ukraine whole and entire, including Crimea? Does it have to be the liberation as well of the occupied areas of Georgia? What is the line that you are thinking about?
I certainly don't think that you could expect the G7 to lift sanctions simply because there's been a ceasefire in Ukraine. And that, again, goes straight into Putin's playbook. In my view, we should continue to intensify sanctions with a rolling program until every single one of his troops is out of Ukraine.
Including Crimea?
And, as I said, every single one of his troops is out of Ukraine.
Would you include Georgia? That's been occupied now, as you know, since 2008, South Ossetia and Abkhazia.
I think that we need to have a total rethink about all the support that we offer countries such as Georgia and Ukraine, and what we're evolving towards is, I think, a new way of looking at Ukraine. So if and other countries, former countries in the former CIS or former Soviet Union, and I think because of the sheer quantity of a NATO-compatible materiel and the weapons that we're now supplying, we're changing the dynamic and we're changing the security architecture of the situation bit by bit. And there's going to come a point when I think we should recognise that this has happened, and that we are now I hope that we will be in a position with willing partners to offer not an Article 5 security guarantee to Ukraine, but a different kind of future, a different kind of commitment based on the idea of deterrence by denial, so that Ukraine is so fortified, so protected with weaponry. The quills of the porcupine have become so stiffened that it is ever after indigestible to Putin, and that is the path that we are now on. And I think that's a very productive way of thinking now about something that has been a problem we haven't been able to solve, which is the homelessness of Ukraine and other countries in Europe's security architecture.
May I just build on that, because your point is very welcome. The point you're making is very focused on Putin. You'd also recognise, I'm sure, that Putin is not Russia. He's just stolen it. The reality is that there is a criminal conspiracy that calls itself a government sitting in the Kremlin today, centred on a single individual. But there are opposition voices. We know, for example, of Alexei Navalny. We know about Vladimir Kara-Murza. We know of Michael Khodorkovsky and indeed Garry Kasparov. There are prominent Russian voices who have voiced a possible different future for the Russian people, and one that I suspect is rather more popular to the Russian people than the current system of vassalage that they live under. Would the UK government consider offering support and assistance to them and making sure that independent democratic voices have a way in? And would that include things like making sure that virtual private networks for the internet are freely available to Russian citizens who currently find it very difficult to buy them because, of course, the economic sanctions are effectively assisting Vladimir Putin's censorship?
Yeah, we see all sorts of possible futures for Russia, but to get back to the first point I wanted to make in answer to your first question, we've got to keep it simple. Keep this one simple. This is a very, very. I've never seen a clearer case of right and wrong. This is about the flagrant violation of international law, the invasion of a totally innocent country, and it's about helping the Ukrainians to protect themselves. Now that is something that unites the whole the House of Commons, and I hope, and it certainly unites a large number of countries around the world. And I think if we stick to that, we won't go wrong, because I think that the consequences, the logical consequences, politically, militarily, will speak for themselves, and I'm sure you'll have thought it all through. But when it comes to supporting wider civic society in Russia, supporting a free media, free internet, we do a lot of that already. I think that we've just put another £4.1 million into supporting BBC Ukrainian and Russian services to help people get at the truth, and we're doing a lot more to promote proper understanding of what's going on.
Prime Minister, Tobias Ellwood, as you know, is not in the country at the moment. He's in Warsaw, and he's asked me to ask on his behalf about the integrated review, which rightly spells out looming European security threats, but not the timeline. And he highlights the cuts to the RAF's F-35s, Typhoon and Hercules fleets, to the Army's tank and armoured fighting vehicle numbers, and the 10,000 reduction in troop sizes to the lowest number now since before the Napoleonic Wars. In this new era of insecurity, are you going to reconsider those numbers? And are you going to request the National Security Council to produce an updated assessment on the long-term strategic threat picture with recommendations on how gaps in our capabilities can be filled?
I think if you look at the integrated review, it was actually pretty much spot on in the priorities that it set out for the country. And in particular, it said that the Euro-Atlantic area was the number one issue of concern when it comes to the choice between high-tech and heavy armour. And Tobias and I had this conversation here. Actually, I think that the advantages of high-tech in helping the Ukrainians are pretty manifest now. And I think that the effectiveness of the NLAWs, of Starstreak, of Javelin, of a lot of the systems that we're now using, Switchblade. These are the things that are the UAVs, the TB2 drones that the Turks have been supplying. These are the game changers, and so I think it was right for us to go for this massive increase in expenditure as we did with the defence review, 10% increase. But it was also right for us to focus on real value for the UK and make sure we could maximise our ability to project force overseas, and that's what the integrated review gives.
Thank you, Prime Minister.
Okay, moving on now to look at the humanitarian issues that involved Sarah Champion.
Thank you. Hello again, Prime Minister. I'm very grateful that the UK has committed 400 million to humanitarian support for Ukraine, but I wrote to you on the 9th of March asking for details on whether or not this money has actually got to the people that it's intended for, and I haven't had a reply. So could I ask you now some specifics? How much of the UK's pledged financial contributions have reached organisations supporting communities in Ukraine? How much has reached international agencies? How much has reached local organisations, local NGOs, mayors and councils?
Right. So, Sarah, I'm going to have to
right to be.
I'm so sorry. I will. I mean, the number's high. We've given at least 400 million.
But you've pledged 400 million.
Correct.
I haven't seen the evidence that it's
I will be
landed.
very happy to share where it's going. We have, as you know, lots of visa application centres in the region. Lots that we're doing lots to help with the reception of refugees. But how much has gone to each mayoralty in Szczecin and Warsaw and exactly how it's being divvied up, I will really have to get back to you.
I would be really grateful if you could, Prime Minister. You mentioned earlier humanitarian corridors and how they're being flagrantly exploited. I mean, they're necessary both to get people out but also to get aid in. So have you considered doing something as happened in northeast Syria with the UN Security Council resolutions to try and keep these passages open for the safety of everyone?
Yes, I mean that's in essence what we're looking at. The difficulty is that the Russians are very adept at manipulating the humanitarian corridors and negotiations to regroup, to deal with other objectives, and then come back and do it again. I remember sitting around many negotiating tables talking about Aleppo and what we were doing to help people out of Aleppo, what assurances Putin could give, and it was in the end turned out to be more or less completely valueless. They pulverized Aleppo.
So
they
are
didn't
there other
stop.
options that you're considering? Are there other options you're considering to try and keep those corridors open?
Well, I mentioned one to Tom. So we're thinking about is there anything we could do to help actually relieve Mariupol, which would be a great thing to try to do. But that is going to be very, very tough. And don't forget, Mariupol is an extraordinary place, and it's fallen before to Russia and then been retaken by Ukraine. So what's happening is absolutely tragic. If we could think of an easy solution, we'd do it. But we are, as everybody knows, heavily constrained.
Prime Minister, I've also written to you about the mine clearance that needs to happen and the British charities that are really central to achieving that. Again, if I could get a response to that, because the horror that's going on at the moment, it might only be small things we can do, but if we do all of them, hopefully we can make it a little better.
You're so right, Sarah, and you're so right. And I don't know whether you've heard this, whether the committee, but as the Ukrainians push back Russian forces in some places, what we are hearing are absolutely horrifying tales of what the Russians have done while they're occupying.
I mean, you will have heard and been as equally horrified as I have around the countless examples of sexual violence being used as a weapon of war, and this seems a very systematic technique, if I use that term, that the Russians employ. We've got to end the apparent culture of impunity around this and show that there are going to be consequences. The UK has been a leading light on PSVI around the world, and I'm very proud of that. So what practical steps is the UK taking to prevent sexual violence and document those crimes? I mean, have we got PSVI people there on the ground? What support is being offered to NGOs for the victims and survivors?
Well, we have a PSVI, Preventing Sexual Violence in Conflict team working to support survivors, hold perpetrators to account for what's happening in Ukraine. I believe that they're in the surrounding area rather than in country itself, because so many of the victims are now outside Ukraine. And Sarah, I agree with you. It's something that the Foreign Office pioneered actually under William Hague and Baroness Hellig, who I think really got that on the international agenda and quite rightly. And the tales are appalling. But we have a team in the region and we're funding them very actively.
That's very reassuring. And my final question, I'm sure again you're aware of the unaccompanied children that are fleeing Ukraine. We've heard a lot of concerns about a large number of children from orphanages fleeing into Moldova, a country which, to be honest, is ill-equipped with safeguarding of its own children, let alone the influx from Ukraine. UNICEF reports that more than 500 unaccompanied children crossed from Ukraine to Moldova in the few weeks between the 24th of February and the 17th of March. What plans do you have in place to strengthen and increase the safeguarding systems in countries surrounding Ukraine? And do you have any plans that would enable children to come to the UK for safeguarding, for example, as we saw with the Dubs Amendment?
With the Dubs Amendment, yes, sorry. You're right in what you say about children. It's one of the horrifying aspects of the conflict that so many women and children have been coming out. What we want to do is, wherever possible, to ensure that children are united with their families, and that's clearly in the best interests of the child. Before bringing them as you asks to this country, we are seeing what we can do with NGOs to make sure that they get all the safeguarding and help that they need. But it's a very difficult problem. But before we go to a Dub-style solution, I think we need to think about whether then the needs of those kids are probably going to be best met if we can keep them in the area and get them back to their families.
I agree. Thank you. Thank you.
Moving on to Julian Knight now. Julian.
Prime Minister.
Julian.
Our recent committee session into Russian disinformation showed that there are growing doubts amongst the Russian population concerning Putin and his lie machine. Prime Minister, should we not seize this opportunity? We pledged 4 million, as you mentioned to Ms. Tugendhat earlier, to the World Service, but should we not look to fund a sustained information strategy in order to bring the truth to the Russian people about the crimes being committed in their names?
You're so right, and one of the depressing things is the ruthlessness with which Putin tries to conceal the reality of what's happening from the Russian population. And genuinely, you can ring and talk to Russian friends, and they will seriously dispute what is going on in Ukraine. They really, I'm afraid, people are very vulnerable to the lies that Putin is telling, and we have to be extremely energetic in exposing them. So we've got a government information cell that's been going for some time to counter disinformation. You can imagine the sorts of things, Julian, that it tries to do. But what we've been, our whole approach has been to try to be as frank with people as we possibly can about what we know, and kind of demystifying things. So it was the UK and the US that were out there in the beginning saying there is a massive problem. There are 100 battalion tactical groups on the borders with Ukraine. We know this, and we put it into the public domain. Similarly, when we got information about false flag operations, we immediately put it out into the public domain, trying to fight the disinformation with as much exposure of the reality as we can. I think it's starting to have an effect. I mean, I think you are seeing signs now in Russia of people waking up to what's going on.
And that's very much about their disinformation directed to us. And since 2013, the Russians have been very, very open, in fact, talking about the fact that part of their strategy is effectively to undermine the West. Should we not now turn the tables on them and all our news media organisations working together in order to get the truth into Russia by whatever means that we possibly can, and coordinating on a governmental level?
Yes, I mean, I think that's why we're as I said to Sarah, why we're increasing funding for the BBC, and we're doing whatever we can to counteract the Putin narrative, and we are doing an awful lot to communicate to ordinary Russians what is really going on. And as I said, there are some signs that it's getting through. And this new movement with green ribbons and so on, I think there is a growing awareness the reality of what's happening in Ukraine, but it is very, very far from universal in Russia, very far.
Russia Today and Sputnik have been blocked, but there is nothing stopping the Kremlin starting up a new media organisation via a social media platform almost in a heartbeat. To stop this happening, Prime Minister, do you think we need the clearest possible definition of what constitutes a recognised news publisher in the upcoming online safety bill?
Yes, and I know you've been following this like a lynx, bloodhound or something. A news publisher needs to have a registered UK address, have a standards code, and have editorial control. And the online safety bill will force all such companies to tackle illegal the content that is illegal in the scope of the legislation.
Not all such companies, though, because the reality is that banning Russia Today and Sputnik is of little importance, because the real disinformation is coming from Russia is emanating from platforms such as Telegram. As it stands, it looks highly likely that Telegram will not be considered as a high-risk, high-reach social media platform. And in order that Telegram, amongst others, face the strictest regulation under the online safety bill, should in the coming weeks the government outline precisely which specific companies will be in scope to be considered high risk?
As news publishers or as high risk?
As high risk. And do you think Telegram should be included as one of those high risk companies?
Well, look, I'm going to have to say that I think that we need to make sure that anybody putting stuff, my general feeling about it is anybody putting stuff online should in a systematic way, putting content online in a systematic way should be defined as a news publisher, and it should be subject to the controls that we've set out in the bill.
Yeah, my final question, Prime Minister, is partly a request, if you like. Despite no collective ministerial agreement and writing to my committee ruling out such a move just 24 hours before, the Secretary of State for DCMS still seems intent on introducing a new committee which will effectively mirror the work of my committee looking at online safety. This, Prime Minister, would drive a coach and horses through the Select Committee system. Prime Minister, will you commit to investigate this matter, write to me on it, and protect the Select Committee system, which I know you value so much?
Well, I do, and I value your work, but I'm conscious that the committees are really a matter for the House. But I will certainly investigate the matter and write back to you.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Julian. Moving on now to the issue of visas, which is a very challenging one. Dame Diana Johnson.
Thank you, Clive, and good afternoon, Prime Minister. I wanted to ask you about the two main routes in terms of obtaining visas to come to the United Kingdom. And I wondered on reflection whether you thought that not going for an emergency humanitarian visa for those people fleeing war was the right decision, because the route that the government have taken around a family visa scheme, which is about controlling migration and not about dealing with a humanitarian crisis, as you know, has been beset with over bureaucratic provisions, caused confusion and has changed many times.
Well, of course I thought about having a system where we just open the doors and...
no, that's not what I said, Prime Minister. I said an emergency humanitarian visa. So you would still carry out the checks, you'd be able to take the biometrics at the border or before someone got onto a plane. That's what I'm talking about. I recognise you're concerned about security.
Okay, well thanks. Let me just clarify then. I wanted a system, I think we're probably not that far apart then, because what I wanted was a system that was as light touch as possible and would enable people to come here, but would enable us also to do checks, because we are outside the Schengen system. We have the advantage of being able to clarify people's status, their bona fides, and so on. That's not a bad thing if you want to have a program that really works and commands confidence. Now, so far, what it's meant is that we've had 25,000 visas approved. that's not a bad number so far. They're being handled at a rate of 1,000 a day. I mean, it's quite a sizable, and the numbers will mount now quickly. There's no cap on these numbers, don't forget.
Can I ask you then about the Homes for Ukrainians, which is the scheme that still requires a visa? It's a 39-page visa, or 30-page visa as far as I'm aware this morning from speaking to the Minister. But only 1 in 100 of the applications that have been submitted have actually resulted in a visa being issued. And you were asked at Prime Minister's Question Time today about how many of those, I think it's 2,700 who have been given visas, how many of those have actually arrived in the country?
Yes, I know, and I'm afraid I still don't have the number. I know that 2,700 have been given visas, but don't forget that these numbers are climbing, and the generosity of the British people is quite remarkable. I think almost 200,000 people have said they will take Ukrainians. There's no cap on the family reunion scheme. That's already the thick end of 25,000. That's a town. That's a pretty big town.
I totally agree with you, Prime Minister, about the generosity of the British people. But can I just put to you this case of a pregnant woman she's in Poland at the moment. She's heavily pregnant. She's been matched under the Homes for Ukrainians scheme. She's been told that she actually has to wait to give birth in Poland in temporary accommodation in order to obtain a birth certificate for the child, for then to be able to get a visa. Now, is that really what you think how the scheme should be operating, if we're so concerned to bring people over to this country as quickly as possible?
Well, I can't see any reason why she couldn't come here and have the baby here. But I'll be, if you'll write to me with the details, I'll be very happy to look into it.
And then can I just ask about safeguarding? This week, Michael Gove received a letter from 16 refugee and anti-slavery groups who were concerned about the Homes for Ukraine's scheme risked operating as Tinder for sex traffickers. What do you say about that?
I think that is one of the reasons why it's important to have, as light touch as possible, but to have DBS checks and to make and checks both ways. Make sure that we have a program that is really working, and I think that's important for the whole country, because everybody will want to be as generous as possible, but they'll also want to feel that the scheme is really sound, and we're getting the people that really need our help, and that we're helping them in the best possible way.
And do you think the National Crime Agency should be policing Facebook groups where people are putting their personal details? And I think there's one case of a man who said he was looking for a Ukrainian wife. Yeah. There are children who are posting on those Facebook groups to try and be matched with someone in the UK. Do you think the National Crime Agency has a role to play in that?
I think certainly, and I think that one of the things that I've become concerned about in the last couple of weeks is what's happening to refugees. They're overwhelmingly women and children in the region. Are they who is predating upon them? What's happening to them? I think we have to be very, very vigilant about that, and that's why I think the Homes for Ukrainian scheme has got to be something that we're very, very generous. We open our arms, but we also make sure that that scheme is not itself being abused. Not by the Ukrainians, but by people who maybe have bad motives.
I just wondered if you'd had an opportunity to raise with any of the social media organisations, and Facebook in particular, any of the concerns around this scheme and how it's operating by people being able to advertise and match through those mediums.
No, I haven't personally, but it's a very good point, and I'm sure that that Michael Gove and his teams are on it. But what we want, we're going to have a lot of Ukrainians, and that's going to be a great thing. It's going to be a great thing. They're fantastic people, and we're going to be very, very generous. But what we want is a scheme that really does command confidence amongst the British public, but also confidence amongst the Ukrainians.
On to an issue, a general issue about immigration. Bill Wiggin.
Thank you, Clive. 2,700 out of 28,300 in the last 15 days are the visas that have been issued. I happen to agree with everything you've said about how my constituents, the British people, your constituents as well, want Ukrainians to come to the UK and be properly looked after. Why is it that you think it's moving so slowly?
Well, we're processing about 1,000 a day.
Well, that's what we want to get to, isn't it?
And it is, already you've got, what's the population of Hereford, Bill?
140,000.
All right, okay. What's the population of the town of Hereford?
Well, the problem is that in 15 days we've only done 10% of the people who've applied, so we're nowhere near 1,000 a day. And my problem is that what you want is what I want, it's what
Yes.
the people want, but it doesn't appear to be what we're delivering. That's my concern. Why aren't you getting what you want, Prime Minister?
We're getting already sizable numbers, and I think that that's a good thing. And I think it's, don't forget, most Ukrainians already want to be in the region. They in an ideal world, they'd like to go back to their homes. A lot of them increasingly are now wanting to come to other European countries. They're wanting to come to the UK, and that's quite right. And we're opening our doors and opening our homes. The numbers are going up quite steeply now. I think they'll continue to rise for a while to come. I think that's going to be a great thing. This country has a very proud record of welcoming evacuees. I don't want to pointlessly to berate officialdom and blame people for being slow. That's too easy. I think we ask a lot of our officials and our public servants. They have to balance some quite difficult objectives. We've just been hearing some really good questions about modern slavery, about sexual trafficking, about children, about gangsters who might be trading in evacuees. You've got to be careful, and don't forget that the point I made on the first day in the House is that there will also be people coming from that war zone who may not be entirely who they say they are, and we've had some cases, sadly, of that already.
Okay, take you to the complete other end of the spectrum. We have on at least 3 occasions promised the Qataris visa-free access. These are very wealthy people who are unlikely to stay, and yet, despite saying we do it 3 times, we still haven't delivered. And I'm really worried, Prime Minister, that everything you've said to us today, I actually want to happen, but it isn't happening. And the only people who are turn up in rubber boats. Why can't we get the right people through our immigration system instead of the wrong ones?
Well, so if I understand you correctly, Bill, what you're saying is why can't the Qataris and other Gulf countries have visa-free access?
Well, we want Ukrainians, we want Qataris, and we don't want people in rubber boats.
No, well,
we're not getting it.
No, sure. So the Nationalities and Borders Bill, coupled with a few other things, will help us, I think, to do a great deal to stop the cruel trade in people across the Channel. When we will do our best to deal with that, but that's a separate issue from the visas for Qataris and others. I am keen to have a more fluid, much more fluid system for Qatar, and we are keeping our system under constant review, and I recently had the good fortune to tell the Emir of Qatar that we were likely to see progress very soon, but I don't want to go beyond that. It seemed, when you this is one of the things that frankly could go a bit faster.
Well, you were very, very generous in your protection of the civil service a few moments ago. Will you have a very close look at the people who are not moving at the speed at which you'd like? Because you wanted a light touch system, you want that security, you want all the right things, and the country wants those same things too. What can you do to make sure that your wish becomes your command, or vice versa? Because we want more of that.
Yeah. So what you can do is make sure that you increase the number of visa application centres in country, so that you put everything online, so that people can get their application cleared digitally and then come here, and that's what we're doing. And you have to pay to send more officials out to Poland, to Romania, to Slovakia, to everywhere that's currently receiving refugees, and make sure that they're able to process as many as possible. You have to increase our ability to help people at Lille, at Calais, and everywhere, and that's what we're doing.
Excellent. So we can look forward to the right people arriving in the next coming days.
I can assure the committee that we are going to see, and thankfully, praise be, we're going to see a lot of wonderful Ukrainians coming, and I also think, Bill, to cheer you up even more, we're going to see some pretty fluid toing and froing by our friends in the Gulf.
Could we just move on, Prime Minister, to the two schemes, the sponsorship scheme and the family scheme for Ukrainian refugees? The Home Affairs Select Committee was told 2 weeks ago that local authorities will get £10,500 for each refugee that came through the sponsorship scheme, and they will get the same funding for refugees under the family scheme. This morning, the Levelling Up Select Committee were told that wasn't true, and there wouldn't be any funding for local authorities for refugees that came under the family scheme, even though refugees coming under that scheme will still need the same wraparound support, almost entirely, that refugees under the sponsorship scheme will get. Can we have a look at that? Because clearly local councils are under financial pressures, and it just doesn't seem fair to them to say, over to you, it's all yours, no help.
Yes, so thanks, Clive. You're right about the distinction, and so the family, the Homes for Ukrainians scheme attracts support of £10,500 per person per year for the council, £8,755 per child for education, plus of course the £350 per month to the recipient home. The broader category, the initial category, the family reunion scheme, what we're starting with is access to benefits, access to the NHS and all and mental health care, access to education, free travel, and I think that is a considerable package of support. The way of paying for all that is clearly through the massive support that we continue to give to our NHS, to our education budgets, and so on. They are going to be an extra cost, but on the other hand, don't forget there are 1.25 million job vacancies in this country. One of the problems our economy has, I'm sure we'll come on to it, is the need for more pairs of hands to do crucial jobs. And I think one of the things that the Ukrainians will be able to do immediately is contribute to the economy by working.
But perhaps lots of organising that help for Ukrainians, finding school places for the kids, getting them to travel to school and paying for that, giving benefits advice, is down to local authorities who are going to get not one penny of extra help for people under the family scheme. Can you at least not go away and look at that? Because, or you can explain to me what extra local authorities are required to do under the sponsorship scheme that they're not going to have to do for families under the family scheme.
Clive, Mr. Betts, we are making a distinction because we think there'll be particular types of people who will want to take advantage of the Homes for Ukrainians scheme, and people who want to come under the family scheme.
But
I'm not going to pretend that this can be done without an extra call on the public purse. What I'm also saying,
Prime Minister, will you look at the funding for
Of
councils?
course,
Because they're still going to have to put
Yes.
resources into helping people under the family scheme.
yes, and we've massively increased support for councils over the last year, and we will continue to do so.
Well,
But I think that what we should also recognise is that at the moment the dispersal of refugees around this country is not particularly equitable, and I'm looking at Pete now because it's just popped into my head. There are quite a few councils in Scotland that don't take very many, and I'm afraid so. I think what would be good to see is a greater spread and a greater fairness in the distribution.
Well, okay, I don't think you've really asked the question about funding, because I think we're going to keep on going at this because councils are still going to have to provide services for people under the family scheme. Can I just come on to the fact that the two schemes are so different? The Local Government Association told the committee this morning that, and one of the reasons for the sponsorship scheme is because there aren't simply the numbers of vacant affordable housing around the country which you could just move refugees into. They've already had, councils across the country, 144 homelessness applications from Ukrainian refugees. Now, some of them have come under the family scheme because family members are not obliged to provide housing for people. Councils would like to house those families with some of the people who want to volunteer, some of the 200,000 people want to volunteer to provide accommodation in their homes. But councils are not being given that information, access to that data.
Really?
So that people are being housed in temporary accommodation rather than the homes of families that want to receive them. Can we at least unblock that logjam?
Well, that seems to those bits of I see no reason at all why councils shouldn't have access to that particular data.
Right, I think it's a very positive move, Prime Minister, and thank you for that. Right, moving on then to the other major subject on the cost of living issues, Neil Parish.
Thank you, Mr. Betts. Good afternoon, Prime Minister. There's a perfect storm of factors we are facing with rising food prices. The awful situation in Ukraine, which is now known as the breadbasket of the world, has a knock-on effect on global food security. They produce 12% of our global wheat exports, and a Russian blockade of their Black Sea ports is taking that wheat out of the market. This is driving prices up everywhere. It's also leaving countries across North Africa, Middle East short of wheat because much of their supply comes from Ukraine. As you know, Prime Minister, I'm always very keen to see us produce more of our great British food. This helps us to protect ourselves from volatile markets abroad, but also by being less resilient on imports, it means reliant on imports, it means there's more food abroad for those countries facing shortages. So I want to see us produce more in this country. Growing food is in the DNA of our farmers and producers. They want to produce more, and we need to help them to do it. Our consumers and retailers want to buy British food, and they want stable prices. We are 64% self-sufficient in all foods, but this has been declining for decades. For example, we were 55% self-sufficient in vegetables and 71% sufficient in potatoes. For both of these, self-sufficiency has fallen by 16% in the last 20 years. 16% in the last 20 years. So we can boost production. The potential is there. The farmers want to do it. The consumers want to buy it. So my question is, Prime Minister, farmers want to produce more food. So what can we do to help them to do it when we have a strong supply of high quality food? So we can have a strong supply of high quality food at stable prices.
Well, we need. Thank you very much, Neil. And I know what a passionate advocate you are of UK food and farming, and you're quite right. And I share your ambition that we should grow more of the food that we eat, and we can. And we're trebling our investment in the Farming Investment Fund, which will help farmers with their equipment and their technology. But we need to encourage young people to go into farming. And to see it as a great future. It is a great future. And when I talk to farmers, one of the sadnesses I find is they can't persuade their kids to do it. And my grandfather was a farmer, very unsuccessfully, I may say, and it's a wonderful thing to do. But you need to support UK agriculture, give better business advice to farmers about the options that they have, help them with their equipment, help them with their training, but also we've got to have a more positive attitude about consuming our own food, but also our own exports. And one of the things, Neil, you and I have discussed before is the importance of having in every embassy around the world somebody whose job is specifically to champion UK food and farming, and that's what we're doing. It is, by the way, growing the whole time. The exports are colossal now of UK food and drink, absolutely colossal.
But I think, Prime Minister, what we want to do is actually get help with costs, right? So one of the things is that with fertiliser, as you know, is that the invasion by Russia is combined with rising gas prices send fertilisers through the roof. The fertiliser now costs 4 times more than it did a year ago at £1,000 a tonne. All of this is a knock-on effect on the cost of food. The farmers cannot absorb these costs alone. All farming needs fertiliser. Livestock, dairy, cereals, vegetables, and even salad production by hydroponics here in London all need fertiliser. But we only produce 40% of our own. We have 2 fertiliser plants. One is still open, but one is closed. If we can contain fertiliser costs caused by events abroad, we can boost home production and deliver more stable prices for our consumers and help with world food supply. So the question is, Prime Minister, and I normally would not ask for this, but as a short-term solution, can we do everything possible to reopen that second fertiliser plant, keep them both going?
Which one? Which one?
There's up in the north of England, right? They're both of them there, okay, and they are there. One is mothballed at the moment. Can we not get that fertiliser out there? Because if we want to produce good food and more of it, we need to do it now.
Okay. Okay. Well, Neil, look, I want to spread the good stuff over the fields of this country as passionately as anybody, and you've got to do that. And by the way, it's one of the first, the cost of inputs into fertiliser and feed is clearly one of the biggest problems we have. But that is hydrocarbons. And, Pete, one of the reasons we'd be crazy to abandon our hydrocarbons industry is because it's so vital. I mean, I think 36% of our diesel, including all the, virtually all comes from Russia. 36% comes from Russia. If we're going to end our dependence on Russian diesel for British tractors and farm vehicles, we've got to think practically about where else it's coming from.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more.
But on the fertiliser, I make the same point. We have a long-term need for sustainable hydrocarbons and for basic inputs.
So you will help to get those plants open.
I will. Now that I'm. Thank you, Neil. No, look, now that I'm alerted to the need to get the second fertiliser plant going, I don't wish to commit, Clive, to this committee that I will wave a magic wand and open this fertiliser plant, because I will doubtless be told that there are overwhelming circumstances that make it impossible. But I will jolly well find out what I can do. I will have a look. Okay.
I look forward to you taking immediate action, Prime Minister.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Now to Philip Dunn to do with energy issues.
Prime Minister, this follows on very neatly from what you've just been saying. That my interest is in the cost of living challenge arising from increasing energy prices. So for the last year or so, since economies started to emerge from the pandemic, all of our constituents have been seeing astonishing increases in their energy costs, exacerbated clearly by the impact of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. To what extent will the energy security strategy, which you're planning, will address the cost of living pressures?
I think you have to provide as much short-term relief as you can to people within the fiscal constraints that we have. The 9.1 billion that we're giving to help people with the cost of energy, abating the council tax, and so on. The stuff, the extra cash we're giving to councils, by the way, Clive, under the Household Support Fund. All those things that we're doing to help people with the cost of living. But we've got to recognise that in the UK, we have just failed for a generation to put in enough long-term supply. And it's been one of those colossal mistakes. And renewables are fantastic. Offshore wind, I stress offshore wind, I think has massive potential. But so does nuclear. And this is the country that split the atom. The first ever civilian nuclear power station was at Calder Hall in Cumbria. I seem to remember from my Ladybird book on atomic power. Why aren't we doing it? Why have the French got 56 nuclear reactors and we've got barely 6? Whose fault was it? Labour Party, obviously, but I leave that on one side. It was, and the Lib Dems. Thank you, Mel. But we've got to fix it now, and I'm not going to pretend that you're going to get a nuclear reactor on stream in real time for our constituents in the next couple of years. No, we've got to do lots of other things, including transitional hydrocarbons. And basically helping with the cost of living wherever we can. But long term and medium term, we've got to be looking at big ticket nuclear solutions, Sizewell and other projects, but we've also got to be looking at small modular reactors. And Bill mentions the Qataris. The Qataris are just one of the countries that wants to work with us on SMRs. There's a huge list now of potential partners for Rolls-Royce to do that.
So your government is the first government in 30 years to make a decision on nuclear, and I applaud that. I think that's exactly the right thing to be doing. But as you say, it's going to take a decade to bring a major system on stream.
Well, yes.
How long do you think it'll take before a small modular reactor is contributing to the grid?
I saw a bit of paper last night saying that they think that before the end of the decade, but they will have to go quicker than that.
So 8 years or so.
Yeah. I'm not going to. But if we don't start now, this will be we won't be fixing the problem. Yeah. But I'm optimistic that we can have we've shown that we can do things really fast. The booster rollout was unbelievably fast. We've done some things fast recently. I think we should have a look at.
So there may be scope for your future planning bill to look at the planning requirements for major infrastructure projects like nuclear on small modular reactors on existing nuclear sites where they're likely to be welcomed rather than fought. Can I just take you back then to what you were just touching on, which is the transition. So as we move towards net zero Britain, we will require fossil fuels to continue to support the economy for another 3 decades. It's currently 3/4 of our energy demand in this country is met by fossil fuels.
Of our energy demand, not our electricity demand,
no,
but our energy demand.
If you look at we heat homes, we use it for transport and so on. Our oil and gas reserves are currently depleting rapidly. What is the prospect for the energy security strategy that you're going to be unveiling, providing some further exploration opportunities for the continental UK shelf?
I think that we'll look at all those options. I think the hydrocarbon riches of the world, I'm sorry to say, are still vast, and that is it's a bad thing because we want to move away from hydrocarbons as fast as we can, but it's also in the short term a useful thing, and there's no doubt the United States disposes of colossal wealth in oil and gas, and so does the Gulf, so does Iran, by the way, and if we could get an agreement on the JCPOA, not to chuck another difficult subject in, then you know another source of supply might open up.
So does this suggest that you're moving away from the climate change ambitions that you were trumpeting at COP26 in Glasgow only 6 months ago? No,
not at all. By the way, I think one of the most productive lines of research, and we must not close down the hydrogen route. Hydrogen could be a fantastic solution, particularly for heavy goods vehicles, for farm machinery, for diggers, for ships. Hydrogen really could be the answer. How do you get hydrogen? You get hydrogen out of hydrocarbons. So there's a long. If hydrogen is going to be part of the mix, and I think it is, then hydrocarbons are going to be part of the solution for the long term. And that doesn't mean if you combine use of hydrogen with carbon capture and storage, then you have a serious long-term prospect for the UK. And
so are you suggesting that we make hydrogen is derived from processing water, and the oil and gas element of it is to provide the energy to drive that process? Are you suggesting therefore that you're looking at purely a grey hydrogen rather than a green hydrogen production technique? I
think you should look at both sides, both green and blue hydrogen, and I think you should also. I mean, if you think about people are anxious at the moment about the putting in ground source or air source heat pumps to heat their homes, and everybody's worried about having to replace their boilers at vast expense. Well, I think for some people that will be the right solution. I think the price of those things will come down very fast as more are made, but you've also got to look at the possibility of going back to where we were actually in the 60s and 70s, when town gas contained a lot of hydrogen, and you could put a lot more hydrogen into the pipes.
And that something that you persuaded? Just one more question, if I may.
Well, I think we're getting very close to time.
Okay, final question.
But the net zero, the ambition to keep going on the path towards a net zero, no, that has not been adulterated or lost at all.
So you would welcome our committee doing an investigation into the potential for oil and gas exploration while maintaining the ambition of net zero?
I think that'd be a very useful thing, yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, right. Okay, thanks. Prime Minister, just coming back to the issue of help with people's energy bills. The government's chosen the council tax rebate, the £150, as a major way of doing that. It seemed like a scheme dreamed up in the Treasury, passed on to deal department to try and sort out, and then passed on to councils to sort out the further problems when they come to implement it. Just one particular element I want to raise with you is a real concern. That for some of the poorest tenants in private accommodation who pay their council tax in with their rent, the £150 gets handed over to their landlord.
Right.
And some landlords are going to get multiples of £150. I assume that was not the intention of the scheme.
No.
And is there anything you can do about it?
Yeah, you mean people who are paying who paid local housing allowance.
They pay their council tax with their rent to their landlord.
Yeah.
The landlord therefore effectively pays the council tax on to the council.
So they don't get the abatement. They get the
landlord who gets £150.
Yeah. I will certainly look into that, Clive. I don't have an immediate answer. But that's a wrinkle that I hadn't foreseen.
Yeah, it's been confirmed by the Permanent Secretary.
I'll have a look at it.
I suppose the second question is, if it's too late to sort it out with the current rebate, if the government goes for an extension of the scheme in any form, I'm not saying you have to commit to this at this stage, but if you do at some point during the course of the year, would you try and ensure that the regulations are written in such a way that the help actually goes to the tenants who have the heating costs and not the landlord who picks up the money?
I think you'll have everybody with you on that one, Clive. And I'll do my best to ensure that what we want to do is to cut the cost for the people who are paying it and to help people get through unreasonable spike in energy prices caused by all the things that the committee has mentioned.
Yeah, I think we're on the same page on that one. Okay, Stephen Timms.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just start by welcoming two recent decisions of the government? One to make permanent the extension of free school meals to children in families with no recourse to public funds, and the other to widen the online safety bill to tackle scam adverts. Both of them subjects we've talked about before at these meetings.
That's right.
I welcome those decisions. I wanted to ask you today first about a letter that was sent to you by the chair of the UK Statistics Authority, Sir David Norgrove, on the 24th of February. You mentioned earlier we haven't got enough people in jobs at the moment. We haven't got enough people, there are lots of vacancies. His letter to you, dated the 24th of February, said this, first couple of sentences. You said at Prime Minister's questions yesterday that there are now more people in employment than before the pandemic began. According to the latest ONS figures, it is wrong to claim that there are now more people in work than before the pandemic began. The increase in the number of people who are on payrolls is more than offset by the reduction in the number of people who are self-employed. Do you accept that correctly?
Yes, and I do, and that's why I took particular care today, mindful as I am of Sir David's chastisement. On all occasions, I stressed that it was payroll employment that I was talking about. But there were 400,000 more. There are now 600,000 more people on the payroll than there were before the pandemic began, and that is not half bad when you consider what we were predicting. Everybody was talking about 12% unemployment. I seem to recall.
Yeah. His point in the letter is that the increase in the number of people on payrolls is more than offset by the reduction in the number of people who are self-employed. And you accept that that's correct?
Well, I think that my overall picture, I think, is right. That the employment record of the government has been absolutely outstanding. When you consider that people were seriously predicting that after COVID, we were going to have not only huge backlogs in our public in healthcare, but also unemployment running at 12%.
Yes.
That has been very, very far from the case.
I mean, it's certainly, I completely agree. It's understandable why it is that employment now is lower than it was before the pandemic. I just wanted to confirm that you recognise that total employment is now less than it was before the pandemic began.
Well, unemployment is actually
employment I'll ask you about. I mean, if I can, the figures from the latest statistics are that the number of people in employment most recently is 32.493 million. The quarter immediately before the pandemic, it was 33.073 million. So employment now is less than it was before the pandemic began.
You're making a very important point. I mean, it depends how you look at this. Unemployment is now back down to, which is the thing that when we were growing up, that was the thing that we were worried about because that was the terrifying thing that happened to people. They were slung out of their jobs, and it was awful in the 80s and the 90s, and we remember that. Well, now that is low. That's back down now to pre-pandemic level. That's 3.9%. What we've got at the moment,
employment is still less than it was before the pandemic.
Although payroll employment is higher, what you're pointing to is a very interesting thing, which is the self-employed. For reasons that everybody's trying to get a handle on, it looks as though large numbers of people, possibly in their 50s, are deciding that what with one thing or another, they want to do something else.
And some of them have gone to the payrolls, which is why the payrolls are higher.
Some of them perhaps have gone on to the payrolls. Some of them are doing other things. So actually what we want to do is to find ways of helping those people back into work and get them, because they have fantastic skills to contribute.
On the employment point, you have said in the Commons 9 times, I think, that the number of people in work is higher now than it was before the start of the pandemic. I think you've recognised this afternoon that those statements were incorrect.
I think I have repeatedly, and I think I took steps to correct the record earlier.
Have you? I hadn't seen that.
I think I did. I think I did. But I've certainly been very punctilious to talk about payroll employment Mr. Timms. But there is a very interesting thing, which is that people in there, there's something happened, which is that people in at a certain stage in their life are not deciding to go back into the labour force. Now that is so we have vacancies now at 1.25 million, record job vacancies, and frankly those people have some of the skills we need. We're probably short in this economy, and one of the pressures that we have on supply chains and on inflation is we're probably short of about 500,000 pairs of hands to do crucial things, and many of those pairs of hands belong to those people in their 50s who've decided to do something else. Now, one of our challenges is to get those people back into work.
I completely agree with that. Moving on, Citizen Advice has calculated that a single unemployed person was spending just over 15% of their benefit on energy bills in 2020. It's going to be 25% in April, and it could be up to 47% when the cap goes up again in October. Why was there no help in the spring statement for people dependent on out-of-work benefits?
Look, I know how tough it is for people to meet the costs of energy, and I think that you're raising a very reasonable point, and you have to decide where you're going to put your fiscal firepower, given that we don't want to put up taxes and we don't want to borrow anymore. So what are you going to prioritise, and who are you going to make sure that you target in order to have the maximum economic benefit for the whole country? And what we think very strongly is that you're better off helping people into work. And I know that there are many difficult cases, but that's why we're doing the council tax support, doubling the household support payments. That's why we're doing the targeted support for people's energy bills. We're doing all sorts of things to help people. But what we want to do, if we can, is to help people by getting them into work. And so we just talked a moment ago about
those who can't work, who are seeing this massive squeeze at the moment. In the pandemic, you increased universal credit by £20 a week. I think most people recognise that. Our committee certainly thought that was absolutely the right thing to do and a very effective way of helping people who needed help. Why haven't you done something in universal credit to help people now, given this huge squeeze that they're going to be suffering over the next few months?
Universal credit has, and we've helped people with change to the taper rate in universal credit.
People who are out of work, I'm asking about. People who, for example, can't work because of ill health.
So the majority of, I think 67% or so, or 65% of people who are on universal credit are either in work or can work.
Is about people who,
and so they benefited from that. And I take your point totally, but the way we're trying to help them is by the direct support that we're giving for people facing particular hardships. So whether with
why
cold
not
weather,
use universal credit? That's my question.
Because we want to try to support people as far as we possibly can. Because we want to support them through other means. We want to support people into work wherever possible. And
have you lost confidence in universal credit?
Not at all. Not at all. No, Stephen, I'm sorry. No, but you're asking a really, really important question because it's sort of fundamental into what we're trying to do. We think that the way out of poverty is to help people into work, and all the evidence is that works. So there are 1.3 million fewer people in absolute poverty than there were. We're seeing a decline in the number of kids in workless households. Getting people, and we can argue rightly about the payroll or unemployment or whatever, but the overall effect on the economy of having large numbers of people, the overwhelming majority of people in jobs that are paid better, that is the way forward, and that's why we've got the Way to Work scheme, so that we get there are 1.8 million people, as you rightly say, currently getting benefits, 1.25 million jobs vacancies. Go figure. We've got an economy which is massively short of hands. Well, we need to get those people off benefits and into work, and that's by far the best thing for them. So you're asking the right question, but that's what our instinct is.
Okay, Prime Minister, we've just got two more colleagues to get in before we come to a conclusion. Catherine McKenna.
Prime Minister, I just wanted to pick you up on a couple of things that you said there, because 75% of children living in poverty across the UK are in working households. And the figure that you use for a reduction in absolute child poverty, not only is that measured against the 2010 baseline, which shows that is the number that have reduced living in poverty since 2010, but it's projected to rise by 500,000 next year based on the government's plans. So the Prime Minister will not be able to say that child poverty has reduced, and by its own measure of absolute poverty, which we believe is inadequate to measure child poverty in this country,
right,
it will be increasing. So I wanted to ask the Prime Minister about the levelling up plans.
Yes.
Do you believe it's possible to level up the country without reducing the number of children living in poverty?
No, and we're going to keep doing everything we can. So that as far as I can remember, the numbers currently are, and you're right. There's an issue we've got to fix, and I'm not going to pretend it's going to be easy, but we're going to go at it as hard as we can.
Okay,
but at the moment, the numbers are that there are 200,000 fewer children in absolute poverty, and I think 500,000 fewer in workless households. Or I think there's a
the numbers aren't going in the right direction, Prime Minister.
And you're right that at the moment we've got the cost of living running too high. That's why we've got to do everything we can to abate it, to help people through this tough time, and we will, using the fiscal firepower that we built up because of the way we've been able to run things. But as I was saying to Sarah actually earlier on in the House, the best way forward is to get our economic activity going and get more people into higher paid jobs. That is what we want, and have that across the whole country.
Which is why I'm asking you about levelling up. Because can you tell me, Prime Minister, how many times child poverty is mentioned or referenced in the government's levelling up white paper?
I'm afraid, although I suppose you're going to tell me it's not mentioned.
I know the answer to this.
I suppose you're going to tell me it's not mentioned at all.
It's none, yeah.
If that is so, Catherine, if that is so, it is a purely formal accident, because the whole objective of levelling up is to make sure that kids growing up everywhere have opportunity, and they don't, and that's what levelling up is about.
Okay, but I just have one more question about a petition.
So we do need to move on, I'm sorry.
Okay.
We need to come to the end of the time. I was going to ask the Prime Minister if he'd actually read the levelling up white paper.
I have. No, I'm not. I have. Have you?
I've read some of it. I'll be honest about it. That's on to the Chair of the Treasury Secretary, Mel Stride.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Prime Minister.
Good afternoon, Mel.
Just want to come back to the discussion you've just had with Stephen Timms about universal credit. So if you look at the spring statement and the actions that the Chancellor has taken prior to that on tax and the taper around UC, there's a lot in that that's good, because it's quite progressive, both in raising the taxes, the way he's done it, and the way he's brought them down as well. However, the hole or the gap is this area of those who are reliant on universal credit who are not in work. One of the reasons it's a particular problem at the moment is that inflation is increasing very rapidly. And as you will know, the UC upgrade to those benefits is pegged to the rate of inflation back in September of last year, which was 3.1%. And of course, inflation is now projected to go up to 8, 9 or 10%. So those people are going to really suffer. It will take about 18 months, according to the ODR, for that effect to pass through so that the benefit recipients actually catch up with those inflationary changes. It would be fiscally neutral to re-examine and re-index those benefits, say in a couple of months' time, and put them up in the light of the way that inflation is moving. So given that it wouldn't cost any more money to do that,
how's that?
Would that not be... Well, simply because through time, as inflation rises, the level of these benefits goes up and finally catches up with where they would have been over the longer period as inflation goes up and then comes down again. But the problem is that over the next 12 months, some of those that Stephen is referring to will have a net reduction in their income of about 10%. And as he rightly says, they're very dependent upon fuel and food and all of those costs.
That's
it's really
right.
tough.
Well,
Could you ask the Treasury to look at the possibilities, I believe they did in the 1970s when we had energy cost push problems, to look at the possibility of an interim up-rating of those benefits, which will be at no cost to the Exchequer across the forecast period?
Right. I mean, I think I'm going to have to go and look at the how you do it in a fiscally neutral way. And look, what we want to do, Mel, is to look after people in the aftershocks of the pandemic as much as we have during the pandemic. And the aftershocks are proving to be really quite challenging because of this the inflationary spike in energy. But that's basically what's driving it, as it it has done before. I'll look at that, but I think the direct action that we want to take is to help people in particular hardship, doubling the household support fund to $1 billion through councils in the way that we have, helping people with council tax, the council tax rebate, notwithstanding the excellent point that Clive makes about the risk of that going to the landlord. I think we'll have to make sure we close that down. There are a lot of things that we're doing together that are designed to tide people over, to help them through a tough time, but also taking the steps now to build in the long-term security. But I'm very happy to ask the Treasury to look at your suggestion.
That would be really helpful, Prime Minister. Thank you very much. Can I also touch on one comment you made just a moment ago, which was we have to take a decision as to how to use our fiscal firepower, which is always true. The Chancellor has decided in the Spring Statement to plant a tax reduction flag in 2024 that he's going to defend at all costs, which is to reduce income tax by a penny. The fiscal firepower that we have is very fragile. As the ABR has pointed out, it could be wiped out at a moment if interest rates go above the central forecast or inflation goes off even further up than is anticipated, or growth is flatter than is anticipated. If we end up in a situation where we've run out of fiscal firepower, we've made a commitment to that tax cut, the Chancellor and yourself are quite rightly saying we're not going to go out and borrow lots more money. That means we'll have to look at spending. So I just wondered what your assessment was of the likelihood that you're going to have to start to look at cutting back on some expenditure, public expenditure, and whether you've had departments start to prepare for that possibility, because it is a possibility that we'll end up in that scenario. I
think that first thing is to recognise the massively ambitious agenda that the government has. We took a big decision. We had to make a big call when COVID broke, and that call was. Given that we could see we were going to have to spend so much to look after people, and it was thick end, $500 billion, 408 billion to get people through the crisis, all told. We knew that was going to put massive pressure on public spending. Where were we going to go? Were we going to go back to austerity? Were we going to retrench? Were we going to cut? Were we going to cut our programs? We're going to cut investment in the long term. We're going to cut fantastic projects that would transform this country over the long term. The integrated rail plan, running out of gigabit, massive investment in the NHS, massive investment in education. Were we going to cut all that because of the fiscal problem? And so I'm getting to your point. So we took a decision to keep going, and that means, as you rightly say, Mel, that the balance is now very fine, and the cost of borrowing is we're borrowing a large amount. The cost of borrowing is 83 billion. Cost of servicing our interest is 83 billion a year, and as you say, that number can easily go up with interest rates. So we have to be.
So if it came to,
we have to be very careful in the way we handle.
Would you look at cutting spending, or would you look to borrow more to protect the tax cut?
And that's why we want to keep going with the plan, the long-term plan that we have, but making sure that we steer a steady course and help people through the short term, but make the long-term investments that are going to, what are the big costs we need to contain? We need to contain the costs of energy, the cost of housing. These are things that we can start to address by making some big decisions now.
Okay. And finally, you said in response to a question from Neil Parrish the importance of exports. I think you were particularly looking at food at that particular moment. The OBR's latest forecasts, and I think, to be precise, it's on page 63, chart I, which you're probably very familiar with, shows the trade intensity as a percentage of GDP that our economy commands now. In other words, how much exporting and importing we're doing now compared to the past. And it also shows what happened to all the countries in the EU and our major trading partners. Now, as Brexit and the pandemic struck almost simultaneously, we all went down. So we all exported and imported much, much less. The others, as we come out of the pandemic, have gone back up to, broadly speaking, where they were before. We've stayed very low. Are you concerned that perhaps because of Brexit and the time it's taking now to strike all these deals with other countries around the world on the trade side, that we're becoming more of a closed economy? And that, of course, will have implications for productivity and also the living standards that we're seeking this afternoon to try and protect.
I'm very keen that we should not. I mean, we've become a closed economy at all, and I think there's we all want to grow more of our own food and so on. But I'm not a believer in autarky. We've got to be.
How quickly can we get back to where we were?
Global trading nation, and I do want to see much more of an export drive, and I think that I think it was Liam Fox, our colleague, a couple of years ago, made the point. I think a lot of UK companies could sell a lot more overseas than they do. And you may have noticed in the newspapers, Mel, there's a big government campaign now to encourage them.
And how long do you think it might be before we get back to where we were pre-pandemic?
I can't prophesy that, but as I told Neil, we are on it, and we want to champion it, and there is no natural impediment to our exports. There is no. It is just will and energy and ambition, and that's what we should be doing.
All right. Prime Minister, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Prime Minister, thank you very much indeed for answering a variety of questions this afternoon from the committee. And I look forward to 1 or 2 replies from you for points that you said you'd go away.
Yes, I'll get back to it.
And thank you for coming to be with us this afternoon.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
The proceeding has ended.